I still think this thing has got to be like if you don't want to put this in Swamp Bass, that's okay. But I don't want to put.
Oh
it
no,
higher than that.
this boss is going in Swamp. Yeah, holy
Okay,
shit.
yeah.
Maybe I sounded like I was misleading. Yeah, this is one of the worst. This is one of the worst bosses they've ever made. All right, time to call Mr. Dratnos. Hello?
What up?
Oh, you're very quiet. 1 second, I might need to turn you up. Or is your mic on your head?
All right, let me try restarting.
Yeah, let's try restart. Yeah.
Okay, hello.
Damn, this is just gonna be how it is, I think.
So,
Wait, let me like double check it's not me real quick. I just need to call someone and listen to their mic real quick. 1 second. Yo, talk to me real quick.
What's up?
Wait, you're really quiet too. Oh my god, it's me.
Yeah, that's right.
Wait, I don't know what the f is going on.
I mean, I can up my volume. Hold on.
No, do not up your volume. Do not. No, I don't want you to.
Yeah, let me use my other mic.
No, please don't do it. No, I don't. I'm leaving. All right, talk again.
Yeah, what's good? What's good?
Oh, let's go. I can hear you. Okay, thank you. Bye.
What? No, don't leave.
What?
What's up?
I'm leaving. Okay, I think we're good.
I
Yes.
changed some more stuff
I'm
on my end.
so
hopefully that
sorry.
didn't
I'm so,
re-brick
dude.
it.
I gaslit the fuck out of you. I was like,
Yeah.
I was like, restart your computer, fucking check your audio interface. Okay, holy fuck. All right, now we're sounding great. Now I just did a little computer restart and I'm good. So I just need to get this tier list maker back up. I'm gonna have the like our old one from before the raid like on the left, and then on the right we'll like move around and like change things. So we will definitely stay true to what we predicted. There are a lot of things that are going to change.
Yeah, I suspect that's gonna be true.
But it'll give us a chance. How far have you gone in Mythic so far? How far is young corn dog?
We are 7 and 9.
Oh, so you've done like a large amount of this. Okay, that's actually really good. That's really makes me happy because I want to. It's really important for me to know like how other people have interacted with this content, especially. So, what guild rank? What rank are you guys?
I guess we're. Let's see. We haven't pulled Echo Neltharion yet, so we're in the like low 20s.
I mean, that's still really fucking good though.
Yeah, we raid tonight as well, so
Beautiful.
see how that goes.
All right, so I have these two set up, and then I'm probably just gonna have a separate tab where I can just watch YouTube videos as we go through here, and then I'll just do them one at a time. All right, what are your general thoughts on the raid? Now, just before we kind of get into talking about the actual bosses. Oh my god!
Good.
Yeah, it's not your fault. It's my fucking stupid. Okay. Dude, do you use an Elgato or Avermedia capture card?
I don't use a capture card.
Oh, you do single PC?
Yeah, single
Okay.
PC.
Never mind. Yeah, I keep having the most annoying bug. But yeah, okay. All right. What are your thoughts on the raid?
Yeah, I mean, reasonably good. I think that you and us probably all reached it a little bit higher eye level than would have been best for the first few weeks.
Mm-hmm.
With that included as well, there's one like kind of big outlier in terms of tuning as well that was quite bad, but a lot of the fights look pretty good. And I haven't done the last two yet, which are probably the two most important ones for how fun a tier is going to be. So,
Oh yeah.
I think we were pretty correct as well in our discussion of like Rashok in terms of like potential and then placements
absolutely.
in the raid. Yeah.
Yeah, I think the last two are actually going to be remembered favorably because the tuning, yeah, people just have crazy gear this patch because of the upgrade system, but they are mechanically challenging, and you don't like gear is as insane of a thing. Like, you're gonna kill Echo of Neltharion when everyone in your guild knows what to do with Volcanic Heart, and that is like very similar to how like Denathrius kind of took 130 pulls to 150 to 200 for like all of farm, because it didn't matter how much gear you had, you kind of just needed everyone in your guild to learn how to live Massacre, and that's when it died, and that killed you at max eye level and week 1 eye level. And it's kind of the same thing with Echo of Neltharion. Like, Echo of Neltharion and Sarkareth are both very mechanically intensive, but they're just short. So, like, the pull counts will be high because they're short, and it doesn't have, like, a P1 gate like something like Razageth. But they're very fulfilling. I imagine they'll be very fulfilling to kill because they're just very, very challenging, just short.
Yeah, which I don't think is a bad thing, but I do think that like the earlier bosses before that probably would have benefited from not just you guys, but even the rest of us having a little bit lower eye level as we hit them in the first few weeks.
It also kind of gave me a little bit more insight into like how Blizzard tunes these races, because in the past, so like my impression of Sepulcher and why that raid took so long, they basically saw how much damage we did on Lihivam, and then they tuned Halandris, Anduin, Rygalon, Jailer, specifically those bosses. They tuned them to be exactly killable with the gear that Liquid and Echo had and the damage we were doing. Whereas like before that, they kind of just did that for only the end boss. But then in that raid, they just did it for like 5 bosses, and that's why it took so long. This raid, they clearly didn't do that. Like, we killed Rashok, and then after we killed Rashok, they buffed the bosses, all the bosses' health. Neltharion, Sarkareth, and, you know, when we're used to seeing that, but when they do that, it usually means, oh, they're looking at the damage we're doing right now, and they're going to buff everything based on that. And they didn't, right? It seemed like they understood that we had more gear than normal with eye level. And it seems like they kind of tuned it for what we would have had in a previous tier, but not like over buffing it because of the eye level we had from like the upgrade system, which I thought was like an interesting decision, and maybe how they've always done it, but just never looked that way.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough from their perspective because we kind of have hit ceilings pretty early. Like my main character, for instance, has no upgrades outside of Mythic Raid and Great Vault loot at this point. Like it's
in 2 weeks, right? Which is crazy.
Right. It was like it took me my second week. I already didn't need all my crests. Like it was insanely powerful, which means that, you know, if they had tuned it so that we wouldn't be having an easy time at this level of gear, well, there's not much more up for us to go, right? We're literally only getting those weekly infusions of sparks and Great Vault gear at this point. So I don't know. I mean, it's a tough challenge. I think probably the upgrade system is some of the culprit, but I think it's really good what it's doing. And the raids, I don't know. I mean, I think short encounters as well are a good thing too, right? Like you talk about Sarkareth as a 7.5 minute fight or something like that. That's, I think, not a problem. It does make the pull count go smaller. It does make the race go smaller, but I think if Sarkareth was better supported by the earlier bosses, I don't think that would be a problem at all. Because people love Sire Denathrius, and Sire was a great short, you know, similarly kind of it was shorter than these kind of Sylvanas and Razageth, you know, 2 Lust encounters that we've been seeing before.
Oh yeah, and that's something where I wonder how that would have changed in this tier, because like we were like, okay, it was very clear that they were going for a sub 10 minute end boss, and I remember when we talked about Sarkareth before, we're like, hey, the other 2 sub 10 minute end bosses are like real good, so like there's a chance, you know, that it's just good because of that. You know, there's a lot of things to say about a lot of 12, 14-minute bosses in the past being like you could kind of identify a phase that didn't really need to be there, and a lot of the boss's difficulty and pull count was just that it was long and not really a like organic source of difficulty. But I think Sarkareth was a big swing in the other direction. We thought they were going sub 10 minutes. They went sub 8 minutes. That's literally never happened before, or even close on like a relevant end boss that was actually really challenging. So it is going to be a lower pull count, but like I said, I don't think this is the boss where you're going to overgear, because we already had so much gear in progression. This isn't the boss where you're going to overgear and you're going to kill Sarkareth in 50 pulls. It's something where you're going to take 90 to 100 pulls minimum around the pull count of Race World First. And I think that is the best thing they've done in the past, is when they have not allowed gear to trivialize bosses. This is also another thing this season, is I think these bosses are going to be needed to be nerfed a lot less than they have been in the past because of the way that they've tuned it, right? For maybe the exception of Volcanic Hearts, maybe going down to a 20-yard AoE instead of 25. It's a little sketchy being 25, but I don't know how you feel about that.
Yeah, I suspect they were listening to people complaining about Evoker saying 25-yard range was small, and they were like, well, we're going to prove you wrong.
Yeah, visual 25-yard range is very large. All right, let's fucking get into it. So we'll probably start just like we did before and start just straight from the top and talk about the very first boss of the raid. So in the previous talk, we thought Kazzara was going to be right around an A-tier fight. Like, I don't know what you're expecting from a first boss. I think a lot of our discourse was like, what could a first boss be to actually be like an S-tier? Or like, what is the best first boss ever, and how far away is that from this? I really enjoy this boss. I think it's decently hard. I think it's harder than the 2 are after it, probably. I don't know how like Pugs feel about that for like coming into the raid and doing this, but it's like personal responsibility. I think it like loses a little bit because like sometimes due to pure RNG of where the portals go and then also where you get your lines, you can end up running like a football field length to get rid of your laser, and like that feels like shit. But I think for most people, you kind of just beat the shit out of the boss until it dies. And I feel like that is a good feeling. There's no like weird intermission. I don't know. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, again, like how do you make a first boss that works well? This one actually feels like a boss as well because it gets harder towards the end. You have less space, you're taking more pulsing damage, so I think it ramps up nicely. I actually feel like the navigating your lasers to the portals mechanic almost has some scalability to harder bosses as well. Like I feel like there's if you needed to think about that more, you could. And I see people in pugs just kind of, and in my guild, I see the idiots in my guild just like making what is clearly the wrong choice about where to bring their line, right? Like, because ideally you should be looking and like seeing, okay, this person only has one that they could go to safely, therefore I should choose the other one given that I have two options, that kind of thing, right? So I kind of hope that they use that mechanic in a harder fight at some point. But yeah, I think A was the perfect place for this because I'm not giving S to a first boss pretty much under any circumstances, but I don't see anything this could do better.
I think you could though. Like I really feel like if you're judging first bosses for first bosses, like you could put a first boss there just be based on the relative things you're judging against. It's just hard for me to picture what a first boss is that like accomplishes what a first boss is supposed to accomplish, and it's like super sick and cool and isn't like too hard, It's like almost like because first bosses can't be super difficult for so many reasons that like it's almost impossible to be an S tier fight because it's just kind of nothing. I think this is really about as good as first bosses are going to get. What is the strat that people do in pugs? If you guys in chat could help, if you guys have like pugged this fight, do people just full YOLO? Like our kill you're watching right now is actually just like put the boss in the middle, spread them out, and just kill the boss. Echo actually has a really good strat where they keep moving around the room and they put like they put the ones like behind the boss and they have the beams all like kind of going from behind and they keep moving forward. I actually think their strat is actually like really smart.
Yeah. That's pretty much what my guild did, except we kind of ran out of room halfway through, called a YOLO, and moved to the other side of the room. But that also worked, so
yeah.
But one of the things where you don't really need a strat, right? But there is a good one.
Yeah. I'm with you, though. I'm okay with A. I'm cool leaving it here. I don't know if it's like top of A or whatever. I just feel like it's a fine fight. It's certainly not bad. We can probably just move on. First boss stuff.
Sure.
I don't know which one to go to next. What is the conventional boss that people kill second? Is it Zaqali?
I think Assault is the easiest one to go to, yeah.
Okay, so we went into this rating Zaqali Assault a C. I think it was kind of like it's kind of a boss. You like AoE on both sides. It's not super challenging. At the beginning and end, you like single target the boss. I see a lot of people advocating for Swamp Ass. I don't know if it's that bad.
It's bad in the sense that it's not doing anything good, but it's good in the sense that it's not doing anything bad. Like,
yeah,
you're not. It does not int the raid by its presence because it is trivially difficult, and so, like, you can imagine a hard version of this fight, right? It's Stone Legion Generals, and that is a nightmare. But because it's an easy version of this fight, I want to cap out how low we give it. I don't feel like it's appropriate to go super low, especially because it's an early boss too, so it's not even got
free
that, like,
gear
wasted
for so many
potential.
people.
Yeah, exactly. Like it's a gimme encounter, right? It's gunship battle from ICC for the classic enjoyers out there, right? Like that's what it is, and like it's fine.
Like the good thing of this boss is it's just like you get to AoE, you get to throw rocks off the wall and like kill mobs like Helm's Deep style. Like that's kind of fucking dope. Like that's cool. Even though it like delayed raid testing by 3 weeks or something like that for them to get that to work, I assume.
It never worked during testing either.
Yeah, it was like super bugged. And then one thing that I don't know is good or bad about this, and I want to hear your take. This boss has a mythic mechanic where like phoenixes respawn like Sun King style, and they like chase people around and you kill them and they respawn. It is the most unnoticeable. Like you could just basically not even think about the mythic mechanic and it just doesn't matter at all. Like the knockback.
You've missed the second mythic mechanic. Yeah, the knockback.
Yeah, the knockback, which is I think showed at the very beginning of this VOD when I pulled it up. It's like you get like barely pushed back. And I don't know. But that's the thing. Is this fight better if that's something you're thinking about the whole time? I don't think so. Like, I think it's probably like more disliked if you're constantly having to communicate Phoenix CCs and shit. Like I feel like it is kind of good that it isn't something you have to think about a lot. So I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't know what you think.
I think this is a case of like they literally just have to put a mythic mechanic on every fight, right? So they're not just gonna ship heroic but harder. Maybe they should have just done that in this case. But I agree, it would be much worse. Like if the wind gust was substantial enough that you had to like pre-move to get behind the pillar, so you're getting blown into the pillar or something, like I feel like that would be awful. So
Did you
Yeah.
guys one-shot this boss?
look, I'm not gonna name names, but the other side let one of the they forgot to tag one of the guys and hit the door.
That's
so
what that happened to us. We
two-shot it.
yeah, we two-shot this boss because the far side we like had to watch it on the VOD, but like he was like stealth mode. He like came up right on this wall right here and like scaled the wall and went around it. So yeah, for the second pull we just called someone a bouncer, and their whole job was just to make sure that like no mobs ever went through. But yeah, we very embarrassingly did wipe to this fight. What about the end? I mean, the end is like you come back, you fight him alone, and it's just like a spread, and then you soak the door. Like I don't know, that's kind of cool. You have to like have enough people to protect the door. But also, why is this maybe like a dumb lore thing? But aren't we also trying to go in the door?
Yeah, I love that the flavor of the fight is that you're like defending the door, and then the fight ends and the door immediately opens.
Yeah, like what's the fucking point?
I will say, yeah, flavor fail there is phenomenal.
Like he's literally trying to help us. Like, why are we killing him? I don't understand.
Yeah. It's not even like we have to do something. It's not like we get there and then the door, like they're like, oh, thank goodness, Echo Neltharion like opens the door from his side safely now that you've gotten the Zaqali out of the way. Like it literally just opens right after you kill the boss. You can have the boss be leaping towards the door and kill it mid jump, and then the door opens like the second afterwards. It's wild.
Yeah, I'm very happy now that we're 2 bosses in. I love our ranking. I don't think this boss is swamp ass. It would have to be pretty egregiously like annoying to be that. I think it's a C. Do you think it's a B? Like, I think it's...
No. It's a C, yeah. I mean, it does nothing good, right? If every raid fight was like this, raid would be, Island Expeditions or Torghast or whatever, like a chore, right? But it's also not bad. It does give you good items, so that's good too, I guess.
All right, so we so far are 2 for 2. That is very quickly going to change. So let's move to Amalgamation Chamber. We hyped this up as like the Shadow Flame looks sick. Like and I still very strongly agree with that. Like the fire in like the red and purple Shadow Flame animation just goes so fucking hard. I hope this isn't the last time we see that. I just think it looks so cool. And I thought this accomplished everything a second boss is trying to accomplish. I would maybe argue for higher. What is your opinion on Amalgamation?
What did we give it the first time?
We gave it an A.
Okay. Yeah,
and there's 2 things above A.
Good. There's 2 tiers above A, right? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, because there's D, and S. Okay. Yeah, I mean, I thought Amalgamation Chamber was good. I mean, it's a second boss, right? So they didn't make it super hard. But yeah, I mean, it was cool aesthetically. The mechanics were cool. The mythic twist on it is, I think, reasonable. And, you see guilds having some amount of trouble or learning with it. But, everybody then does succeed pretty much the same night that they start pulling it, which is good.
What is the
the
strat that people do? Do they do the swap the bosses in P1 strat?
Some guilds do. Yeah, my guild just swaps players. Like, we just have world markers and we have buddies that like two people are going to meet on a certain world marker whenever we swap or whatever. But I know other guilds do. Yeah, they swap the bosses from one side to another and do it that way as well.
Yeah, we did the marker thing in testing, and that was our strat going into progression. But we saw a guild kill it while we were doing splits, and I was like, oh, that's so much smarter to just swap the bosses and then just never move, and you always have the same partner and they're right next to you and all that stuff. That is interesting. I think pugs, what is it, the pug strat, guys? Which one do you guys do in pugs? Hopefully it's swapping the bosses. I think that is infinitely easier to learn. Nobody pugs this? Wait, really? I imagine Zaqali Assault is where you go after Kazzara. I think getting past Kazzara.
You do need 3 for your box, though.
Yeah, so
you have to do this one as well.
Yeah.
I just think nobody's doing it yet, right? Because it's the second week of the tier.
And there's no cross realm. I bet on like Area 52 Illidan, I bet there's been some pugs that have done a couple of these, but because Kazzara is like the wall, right? Like if you get past Kazzara, you can kill Zaqali Assault for sure.
Yeah, I think Shadow Flame is probably harder for pugs than either of those first 2, though. Like it is a little bit more mechanically intense. There's like people are gonna get killed by random shadow orbs spawning on them, that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense. Okay, cool. So, I mean, I don't want to feel like I'm influencing your decisions. Where do you feel like this goes?
I would be fine to keep this in A. If you want to take this up to S, I'm down for that as well. I wouldn't want to go lower than A. I think, because again, I think it was good. It did its job well.
I absolutely think it's S. I think it is hard to find a technical second boss that is going to outperform this gameplay. Visually, it has like some 2-target cleave at the beginning, but it's not like super insane. You can like single target. They come together. The mechanics are cool. They're not bullshit. Full uptime. It looks so fucking good. Like I I feel like this is about as good as you're going to get for a boss at this point in the raid. So I would put it at S, but I can be argued down to A. What do you guys
No, I'm
think in
sold.
chat? What do you guys think in chat? Because you guys have probably interacted with these bosses a lot more than we have, actually. I'm seeing a lot of S's.
Yeah.
I like S. I like S. I like S. All right, hell yeah. Next would be Forgotten Experiments. We put it as a B. I don't really remember our thinking there. I was like really not high on this fight. It felt like they did Prototype, Pantheon, and Council 2 straight tiers in a row, and then they were like, okay, well we've done the like you AoE 3 mobs thing twice, so like we're just gonna do it one at a time, or like you fight them at 50% like Council Blood and Nathria. And it just feel like there wasn't really enough going on. It's also like a weird, like, at the end of the fight, that you can kill the last guy with like 2 or 3 times his health if he keeps healing, and it's kind of just okay. It's also at the same point in the raid as Rashok, right? They're symmetrical, and like Rashok is everything that this boss isn't. Kind of. I know they're trying to do different things, but I'm not a fan of this fight. I think this fight fucking stinks. But what do you think?
Yeah, there's some very weird timing stuff as well. I'm not sure if you guys ever did this because it probably didn't matter for you at all, but the bosses are on a like fixed spell timer where at 1 minute 20, for instance, the second boss is going to cast his first debuff if you have him out by then. But if you get him out at like if he becomes active at 1 minute 21, then he just won't cast that one, and you get an extra you get -1 debuff basically, and that was the easiest way to kill this fight. Is just just push, like you start the animation of him spawning at like 115 or whatever, and then you remove a debuff from the fight. Makes it a lot easier.
What?
Yeah,
it's
very
so
it's very strange.
Oh yeah, so it has like weird, because I know, so one thing Blizzard, so the reason why this happens is one thing that Blizzard does in this fight is they what they wanted to do, interestingly enough, is they wanted to stop the problem that was having, where they didn't want you to like have to push at a specific time to have certain things not happen. So they had certain abilities spawn other abilities, and they're like linked up. There's a few of those, and like that mechanic and another one are the same, just like you're saying. But the unintended consequence of that is you can game that the opposite way, where if you push right after a certain mechanic, he's just not going to cast an extra thing for like 30 or 40 seconds, and it just makes the fight easier, and that is also an unintended consequence. It's just kind of... Council Blood had the opposite problem, I think, where like if you push at different times, you did get different waves of things. They just didn't interact very negatively, so it didn't matter. But yeah, I thought that was kind of strange. I do like the knocking, like the bouncing the balls around thing. Remember one thing we mentioned about this when we put it in B was like knocking these things back on beta was horrific, or PTR. Like they bounce in like every direction, like they would bounce through you. It was like super weird to get it right. But these actually bounce normally. Like you could handle them pretty well, I think.
I still would prefer if it just knocked it away from the boss whenever you touched it, because sometimes like I mean I guess it's fair, but it does sometimes still feel stupid when it gets bounced in the wrong direction.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, yeah, this fight does suck. Like, it's not aggressively bad in the same way as Assault of the Zaqali, right? In that, like, it doesn't int your time to the same extent, but I think it is quite bad. And there's a lot of mechanics that don't matter on this fight. There's a lot of ways to cheese the mechanics that do exist. And, you know, if you're progressing this fight for the first time, that's what you're going to do to a lot of them, too. So, yeah.
Where do you think this goes?
I'm fine going lower than B. I'm fine putting it in C or what, the one below that or whatever. I don't know what tiers you've got in there. I don't think it's quite Swamp Ass, but maybe the one above that.
Yeah, I was about to say like Swamp Ass would be like, I think the version of this boss that is Swamp is the problem with it that you mentioned, but it's way worse. So it's like,
yeah.
So it's not like pushing it at 115 loses you a cast. It's like pushing it at 115, 120, 110, and 105 are all vastly different fights, and you have to learn them. Like literally Stone Legion generals, right? So like that, there's a version of that kind of problem that's much worse than the one that exists. And I think that knowing that and having seen that in the past, that is what this boss wasn't. That I definitely think it drops down into C though, and it sounds like we're both pretty comfortable with that, right? The second one from the bottom. Okay, let's just say one thing. I feel very strongly about this. Blizzard, I want a good council fight next raid. Council fights are staples in every raid since the end of time. You know, like Ascendant Council, the Council in Throne of Thunder, Council of Blood, and Castle Nathria. There are very good council fights, and we have had really, really bad council fights for like 2 years. So I would love to see a mid to like, you know, Zskarn Magmorax level in the raid, like really nice, well-made council fight in the next raid. That would be fucking dope.
What do you think the qualities are of like a good council fight versus a bad one? Do you think there are any like big tips or things that are generally associated with the good ones versus the bad ones?
I would have to look more into that, but I think it's generally the idea of like what Primal Council brings you, which is like certain mechanics interact with other mechanics of the fight, like the different elements interacting with each other. The only real issue is like if it's early in the raid, all of those have to become so inconsequential that it won't wipe you if you fuck it up. Where if it's later in the raid, that kind of thing can actually be really cool.
Okay.
So I would just say, I also think like AoEing 3 or 4 targets is weird too. Like I think it's okay if one of them can't be stacked and that has to change. I think those have always kind of worked out pretty well because it's not just like an AoE fest and the boss dies in 3.5 minutes, right? I don't know. And that's actually a really good stream idea. Or content idea is looking at all of the great. Another really good council fight I forgot was High Botanist, and like thinking of like what has actually made these fights super super sick. I will say one thing that does need to exist though is that you kill them. I think the AoEing thing kind of takes away a lot from the fight. I think having to pick one and then deal with the rest of the fight and kind of build a boss. You know, killing High Botanist in a different order gave you different mechanics. Killing Council of Blood gave you a different last phase and different second phase. Like I think that element of council fights is like universally very good too.
Okay, yeah, that's a cool idea. We could do this for council and for like Sludge Fist and for end bosses and stuff as well.
Oh yeah, we will have a lot of. We can definitely talk about a good Sludge Fist fight after this list. All right, cool. Let's drop Forgotten Experiments down to C and move on. All right. Then we were moving on to Rashok, the first thing we put in the very, very highest tier. Without really spoiling anything, this boss lived up to everything that anyone wanted it to be, right? I mean, this boss is absolutely incredible.
Yeah, I mean, it's a banger. It does suffer from what we assumed it would suffer from, which is, you know, they've created a banger and then they put it 4th or 5th in the raid, right? And that's going to put a ceiling on just how much difficulty they can put into it. But even still, I think people are reaching it and are reaching the enrage on their first kill, and probably will even with a bit more gear, because the guilds reaching it with more gear are going to be a little bit less optimized, and that's natural. So yeah, I mean, the problem is it's going to take you 10 pulls to see the enrage or 20 versus like Sludge Fist, where seeing the enrage was like something you earned after 70 pulls, and that was like, it was a really good feeling. I'm still fine with this being the highest tier. I think I'm still disappointed that this fight was put early in the raid though. Like I'm giving it the highest tier with a bittersweet, feeling.
Yeah, but that's almost like a compliment to the boss though. Like saying,
yeah,
this boss was so good, but the only downside is that it was early enough in the raid to where it couldn't really shine, is basically saying this boss was so good, holy fuck, I wish it was going to be in a more challenging position. Like this boss looks incredible. It's mechanically challenging. Like you said, no matter how much gear you have, you will probably have some low wipes before you kill it, because you will have people die. Like it is objectively hard to live on this fight and soak everything you have to and actually dodge. I think we both kind of said this before the raid, but it is an absolute crime, like history of WoW crime, that Magmorax was where it was in the raid in Rashok. If those two bosses swapped places, oh man, that would just utter perfection. This would be like probably have been a top 5 like mid-tier boss of all time if they would have actually given this boss the treatment it deserved.
That is the thing about giving it the highest tier, is like it is still a raid design problem that they did what they did with it. But yeah, I agree. Like, this was really fun to play. There's elements of strategy as well, like choosing where to place your slam is actually such a cool
my god
on this fight.
It's so cool.
I don't know how you guys handled it. We copied the echo thing where like I was putting down a world marker for where to go with it, but I don't know if how you guys.
Well, it's not about putting down a world marker of where to go. You have to like pull the boss into a certain spot for.
Yeah.
Like this boss has so much hidden intricacy that a lot of people probably don't understand while watching it. But like you are pulling the boss to an edge to make the Armageddon spawn closer to each other. You're making sure the searing slams right before the frontal are not super far away, so you don't have to move as far out of it, and you want to like immediately dodge into the searing slam you're going close to. You can kind of go in a circle around the room, but what you really want to do is like actually kind of keep them all condensed, so the last part of the fight, which should be the hardest to heal, like the most cognitive load, I keep using that word or phrase, you are actually dodging all of the lava from the same direction. There's a massive difference. Even if they're all coming from one direction, it is so much easier to dodge that than having less coming from that direction, but them coming from all around you, right? So like where you place them for the end of the fight is so relevant. And you keep mentioning Sludge Fist. I think this certainly could be compared to Sludge Fist. I think it is much more closer compared to Guardian. A lot of people will remember this from Sanctum, which is like the boss that happened right after Sludge Fist, and you're like, oh, they're gonna put a Sludge Fist in every raid, and it's like a little different. That boss had batteries where you charged the boss. This boss had a conduit where you drained it. The like a lot of the actual fight mechanics, the charge smash is the same. There's like they just basically added a dodging element. I think this is literally the perfect version. I think they failed on Guardian, design wise and tuning wise, certainly, obviously, if you guys remember that. But like, I think whoever made this boss, which I actually believe is a first time fight designer who made this boss, that person should get a raise, and they should be given an end boss at some point, hopefully. I think this was as good as it could possibly be for what they were trying to do. This boss is fucking incredible. I would put this immediately in the top tier, which is where we already had it, but I feel very strongly about that. I can't even point out a flaw with this boss. Like this, it's actually fucking perfect.
Yeah, great fight, right? Like the only problem with this kind of boss is that you can't make all of your fights like this because people want variety and don't just want this kind of fight. But man, I'd be happy with more of these per tier.
Oh my god,
which
dude,
they kind of spoiled with like Magmorax was, I guess, kind of the idea there, but we'll get to that later, I guess.
Yeah. Oh, we're not too far off from that, but it would almost even go in like a higher tier. I just feel like this. You said like they should do something this raid. They want variety, but like think about how this raid already kind of robbed you of variety. There's no long fights.
Yeah.
There's no AoE fights outside of Zaqali. Like it's just like fucking single target. And I really am interested to see over a decent period of time how people actually interact with that, because it's so hard to get opinions. I've heard from Mythic Plusers, they're like, yo, this is the best raid in a while. And I think their take is like, I want to go into raid quick and get gear, and like heroic is easier. So they're like, bro, this shit owns. And I don't know if they're looking much more deeply than that, but I think this raid has actually been a really nice breath of fresh air for a lot of people. All right, moving on to Zskarn. This is a tough one. I actually kind of said this before the patch. This is the kind of boss where if you kill it first, you're going to have a much better time doing this fight than other people. Like even when you watch our kill, which had like a super epic kill, we like killed it from 20% to 0, and we kind of like improvised all of it. There's a bunch of like individual personal plays that were like super insane and saved the pull. But like when you look at other people kill this, they were like, oh, you can end up just doing this fight at some point on the wall. And then, like, if you look at, like, Echo and Method strat, we did 5% to 0 on the wall and played the whole fight before that. They did a full tactical destruction early on the edge of the wall, just like, oh, you can kind of just cheese the fight like this, which I think absolutely, like, takes a bit away from what the fight could have been and how people interacted with it. Like, even if you say Lihivam was super fun to strategize, like, other guilds aren't going to appreciate it as much, right? It still doesn't, that matters to a lot of people. If Lihivam is like an easy boss, the one person who got to strategize it isn't going to change the overall tier list for like how everyone felt about the fight. So I don't know. You guys just killed this fight. What is your opinion of this?
So my experience with this fight was we started progressing it, and I benched myself on Brewmaster to have our DK play Blood, because you need Blood DK for this fight. It was our thought process.
Mm-hmm.
We had a lot of trouble with it. I ended up just coming back in, and we 3-tanked it, and we killed it after 5 pulls of that.
That's smart.
With just me running over and hitting all the bombs, and the other 2 tanks moving the boss, and me just getting bops or pressing defensives and hitting the bombs. So I guess my take on it is I think there were some pretty serious structural flaws with this encounter. The fact that the room fills up so quickly with traps, but then that you can live indefinitely at the wall.
Oh, that's a huge problem.
I think just disqualifies this from being in the top tiers, because that just neutralizes the encounter. We were talking about it, and we were like, we actually could just do this. Like, the only problem is that if before the room is full up, the bombs will spawn in bad places while you're trying this. But if the room was literally just all on fire at the start, I'm pretty sure you could reasonably safely do 100 to 0 in a safe spot on the wall, and that would be bad.
Yeah, so the wall definitely took a lot from it. Like, obviously, a better version of this fight is it fills the room slightly slower.
Yeah.
And the wall stuff doesn't work, and you're killing the boss. Like, I should have been sharing my screen this whole time, but like, you get the boss down to like a killable HP, right? So like, look at like our room here. Like, we're fighting here, right? At the end of the fight, this is like with us having the boss sub 20% and not doing the wall stuff, and we make like a few plays that are sick. Like, THD removes a thing as we're getting knocked into it. Fired Up removes a thing for us to get knocked back. Like, you have a lot of people making individual plays. Dude, if the boss is at 5% and you basically have to kill it before the next tactical destruction, that's a fucking heater. Like, that would have been an all-time great encounter. But you're right. The fact that, like, So we felt good about this because we were like, that's kind of how the fight felt for us. You know, we got the boss to 5%, and then we kind of just YOLO'd this part. This was not planned. This was all YOLO'd. And we were just like trying to make it work, and it felt awesome to kill this way. And then you look at the Echo kill, and it's like, okay, 25% to 0 doing it like this is like this, and that's what most people do and what they should do. That just kind of makes it stink. Also, the golems, I think the golems take a bit from this fight. Do you think the golems are weird?
Yeah, the fact that you like need to control them, and then they make it so you can't control them below 70% health. I'm not sure how I feel about that either. I think that.
Ooh, you just got super quiet. Maybe it's my Discord.
Maybe because you started sharing screen.
Yeah, maybe. I unshared it.
Okay.
Oh, that is it.
Testing.
What?
Okay,
what is
nice.
this Discord setting? Dude, what is this thing doing? Sorry, so talk about the golems again?
Yeah, it's just kind of weird that you like there are these things that need to be controlled to the point that it's comp requiring, right? Like DKs become required on this encounter effectively. I don't know how you feel about the DKs on this fight, right? But like I think pretty much everybody played at least one and usually two. And that was like a big important thing for it. And yet they also have this like CC immune thing that they get below 70%.
The CC immune is what I don't like. I think that just makes the fight worse. Like anytime it is the correct thing to do on the fight, even if you play it well, is run away from the boss and chase down unslowable, unCC'd golems. That sucks. That's you could have just made it 25% or not at all, and it wouldn't have made the fight any worse or really any less challenging. It would have just been less annoying.
Yeah, the CC immune is to like stop you from like I don't even know what the point is, right? Because like you could still hard CC them at 100 if that was what you were going for. So I guess it's supposed to be that you're like focusing them one at a time or something, or I don't know what it's trying to accomplish, but I'm sure that whatever it is could be better accomplished with like a time limit on how long you could get before they do something bad, or some kind of like enrage that they're getting as they live longer. Yeah. So I don't know. I mean, there's definitely a lot of potential here, but it's not Painsmith, and it could have been.
So that I don't really know if I have too much other things. Oh yeah, they made a change from PTR to live where the boss no longer casts Dragonfire traps, but it like just drops them kinda, and like I feel like unless you're using in-game sound, random shout, if you guys use in-game WoW sound, the like in-game sound of them going down is awesome, and it's like the best thing you could do to be aware that they're going off. But like I feel like it wasn't visually very obvious, like right here for people who are watching the video, like these two are about to go under the boss, like right here you can kind of see them right there like exploding with fire, but it's super hard to see. I don't know, I think that was something that took away from the fight a little bit. Melee got so many, even in good guilds, got so many stacks from that.
Yeah, this mechanic, the arm time is longer than it was on PTR, but even still, with the longer arm time, but with the cast being gone, you would get a lot of stacks on melee. This was one of the reasons I thought this tier would be more melee unfriendly than it actually ended up being, and I think part of that as well is just like, you know, eventually you're gonna make that work after some progression that you don't have on the PTR. But man, that mechanic does suck for melee.
Yeah,
this whole fight as well, like the random traps as well. Sometimes you can just with like the random traps can really screw you, and
yeah. So I actually didn't mind the random traps as much because the fight gives you tools to deal with it. But it, like, as opposed to like Magmorax on testing, right, where like you got random roar puddles and it was just like, welp, these are here. Like imagine if Zskarn, you just like couldn't ever get rid of them. Like the beginning of the pulls, I think, is the most obvious, where it's like, okay, this is the first tactical destruction. There's just 3 traps in our way. Like this is fucking awful. But I feel like that didn't end up being as much of a problem. So I don't know if you guys dealt with this, or maybe it was just us. And if it was just us, I don't think we should really dock at points because there's just not, you know, it literally like one guild, maybe Echo as well. Did you guys experience Stone Legion General's level spell queuing here?
No, we experienced different spell queuing. Like we had pulls where it did weird spell queuing, but
like
I guess
weird spell queuing.
Maybe,
like what?
Maybe like 10% of pulls felt like it was bad spell queuing, but it never felt like especially unkillable on those pulls, I don't think. Again, I was only in for 5 pulls, so there was complaining about spell queuing, but my guild does a lot of complaining about this fight just in general, so it's hard to separate the signal from the noise.
Yeah, so there's a couple of lineups where like the boss will do a knockback into bombs, or bombs into a knockback, or tactical destruction before golems or after golems, and all of those things could swap. And so some pulls you would have like a ton of time to kill golems, and some pulls they would spawn super early and become like really out of control really fast. And that was something, I think they did like a hotfix change to that. I'm not sure, but like that was definitely something where it was like just You never want like a ton of RNG. Like RNG wiping feels like shit. So I don't know. That's just something that I think about it just
this
now.
seems like a fight that should just have a static spell queue as well, right? Like there's no reason for it to have variable timers on these mechanics or relative to each other.
Yeah, definitely. So down to the ranking. So we ranked this at quadruple D. I think it immediately is disqualified from that. Just right away needs to go down one. Would you argue it's A instead of S?
I don't like S for this either. Yeah, I mean, like, basically none of the people in my guild actually liked doing this fight, which to me is pretty bad.
Dude, I want to bring that up. I actually was really wrong about this, but like during progression, I was like, God, this fight owns. Because from my position, we were in like the problem-solving area of this fight, and like I'm like every single pull, I'm like solving a problem. I'm like moving things around. I felt super engaged. I was like challenged intellectually. I was like, this is so fucking fun. And I made that statement like an hour before we killed it. I was like, dude, this fight fucking slaps. And every single one of my raiders was like, it's okay. You know, like the people who were actually doing the fight were like, yeah, it's kind of like whatever. So I feel like I would definitely trust their opinion more than mine, especially because like I was literally the only person who had the opportunity to really problem solve it. So I think A. I don't think it's B, right? Like, maybe it's B.
I don't know, man. Yeah, I mean, I also didn't play too much of this fight, so I also don't want to like overvalue my own opinion too much, because I literally played 5 pulls and then I was dead, and the rest of my guild did 60 or something. So they all hated it. It may have just been because we did kind of bad on it, but I think that people don't dislike in such overwhelming proportions good fights.
I think something you brought up is actually interesting, where you guys said you 3-tanked it and killed it almost instantly.
Yeah,
I do think,
and I think that's the easiest way to do
this. Oh
fight
yeah,
by
anyone who's doing Zskarn, you should 3-tank this fight by like we 2-tanked it, but that was just because we needed like a little extra damage. We could have 3-tanked it and killed it, certainly. 3-tanking just like removes a lot of the difficulty of the fight, because there's kind of just like 3 entire mechanics that tanks have to like full focus on, and just removing one of them makes the fight a lot easier and easier to live. But I think that fights that are better off being 3-tanked I think that's actually a detriment. I think that's bad boss design. Like if you can do the boss down a healer or a DPS to add the tank, and you feel like you need to do that to make it easier, that means that it's kind of designed weird, I think. So that would lose it. So you lose a point because killing it on the wall goes from D to D to S. You lose a point because of the tanking thing, and then you lose a point because of the spell queuing and just, I guess, general weirdness about the fight.
Okay, so
B? I guess
yeah,
B.
I think I like B on this.
Yeah. The potential was definitely extremely high.
I agree. Yeah, and I think there's definitely it's like a B with some good and some bad, not just like a B that I don't feel anything about.
Oh, and the golems too. Yeah, I forgot. Yeah, definitely B. I think it's definitely B. Let's talk about the dog. And okay, I was kind of surprised when I went back and look at our list, because I have been vocally against Magmorax.
Yeah, I gaslit you.
Did you gaslight me into ranking it higher?
I think we sort of had this thing. We were talking about how if it swap positions with the Zskarn, that would be good. But then we were still talking about how it could be a good Sludge Fist style fight, right? Like, you could still have this fight where the room slowly fills up and you're like barely up against the edge, and you have to do this nasty progression to get there, and then you eventually kill it. We were also just off of the PTR version of the encounter, right, which had some slightly different design to it as well that they'd kept iterating on, right? So we didn't really know exactly how it would end up playing out in practice. But yeah, I think it was probably mostly me that pulled this up. To be fair, the tuning is largely the problem with this one, right? Like, the fact that this is a 10-pull encounter.
I actually don't think so. Like, I think if this was a 40 or 50 pull boss of just damage optimization, and it's the same strat that people did now, I don't think you'd kill this boss and be like super excited and be like, I mean, you'd be happy it died, but you'd be like, what the fuck was this boss? Like, I don't know. Like,
yeah, I mean, it lost all this. The PTR version of this fight was atrocious, right? Like, where there were RNG pools spawning ahead of you and you couldn't ever fully soak them. But the version they ended up releasing does just feel kind of empty, right? Like, there's not anything substantial.
Dude,
there.
You stand still and do like nothing for like 3 minutes. You basically do nothing. You take things to a marker, you soak fire, and then you start moving around the room. And it's, I mean, I actually think the best version of this boss would have been doing something close to what they did on PTR. So for people who don't know how this worked on PTR, I showed like PTR footage of us doing it yesterday. the pools could not be completely soaked. And that was combined with, so you guys see this Armageddon soak that's coming out in a few seconds, this igniting roar, these little circles. Those were not little circles. That mechanic did not exist. When the boss roared, it put 2 random puddles in the room. And those couldn't be soaked. So it was like an RNG nightmare. Like, every pull would be different. It would be like Zskarn having random traps with no way to get rid of them, right? That's what it would have felt like. But I feel like if they went halfway in between those changes, this could have been a much cooler boss, because there actually becomes a lot of really interesting strategy decisions to be made if these pools cannot be soaked completely. The issue with them was that you could not soak them completely, and there was random ones. If you only had the like regular spittles, and then you also had to like keep them like maintained, but you couldn't get rid of them, I think that would have been a better version of this.
Yeah, I think there's definitely some design space there. I feel like if like each person, upon fully soaking a circle, the person who did the full soaking gets something where it's like, oh, now if I stand in fire for the rest of the fight, I like die. Like that could be a good way to limit how much you could do with that while not having it be like the full uninteractable bad spawn of it that wipes your raid. I don't know.
The one thing I will say to give this boss a little bit more credit is when we killed this boss, we had to spend a decent amount of pulls problem solving it, seeing exactly how long. We tried standing still from 100 to 0 and see if you could just heal through it to make it more simple. We tried moving, and then like at what point do you actually start moving? And then we killed it, and I felt like we threw like really hard. Like I feel like we should have killed it way faster. And I expected to wake up with like Echo and Method both 1 or 2 shotting this boss with the strat, with the way to kill it, and it's just so simple, and there's no damage check. And then they both wiped the exact same amount of times we did, and they both felt like they wiped or they like tilted or they were bad. But I haven't seen a ton of people killing this boss in 2 pulls. Maybe now after the after the thing. So I wonder if the boss is actually like very low key, like more difficult than it appears, because it's just seeming like it's so easy. And I wonder if there's anything to that, just to like give it some kind of credit.
I will say we also had the experience that it took us like 20 pulls or something to kill this boss, and we felt like we threw to have it take that long, which I think is a negative thing, but I like the positive spin on it of being like, oh, maybe there's more to this fight. But I don't know. I mean, it's like a fight where individually, like, you can recognize how easy it is and how few things there are going on, but there are still a few things that people have to learn how to manage, right? And like there is still a little bit of, you have this Armageddon soak mechanic where 4 circles spawn and they can only be soaked. You can only soak 1 out of every 3 sets safely.
Mm-hmm.
You can cheese it a little bit with tanks and stuff being able to do multiple.
No, I actually liked the Armageddon rotation.
Yeah,
that was good.
The Armageddon rotation is like you have like 6 people assigned to a group, and 4 of them need to soak successfully in different spots around the room. Like I think that worked reasonably well, and a couple of our wipes were to people like screwing that up, and I think that's a good thing to wipe too. I still think this thing has got to be like if you don't want to put this in Swamp Bass, that's okay, but I don't want to put.
Oh no, this boss is going in Swamp. Yeah, holy shit.
Yeah.
Maybe I sounded like I was misleading. Yeah, this is one of the worst. This is one of the worst bosses they've ever made. Yeah, I
think it's like egregiously bad as well for the pacing of the raid, right? Like Rashok did some bad things for the pacing of the raid, but it was a good fight individually. But this fight, because it was a bad fight, also did a lot of bad stuff for the raid, and yeah, like I don't know, the world would be a better place if this encounter didn't exist, and it would be a much better place if it was swapped with Rashok or.
Oh my god, dude! This is how you know Magmorax is fucking awful. Is if this was the first boss, people would hate it. Yeah. Like they would think it was a bad first boss, and it was the 3rd to last boss. Like that's really bad. And the breath animation, it just seems like a classic boss. Okay, another glass half full take is like people always judge what they think the raid meta going into the raid is going to be based on like, no movement 5-minute single target sims basically, and that's never been accurate to an actual raid boss before. But now there's going to be a boss in farm, especially when people get more gear and you start not moving, you're actually going to get that, and like that's never really happened before, and that's like kind of unique.
Hey, yeah, maybe this is actually designed to help bring classic players in, right? Wrath is about to be over, and then there's no more good classic expansions left, so there needs to be some kind of retail thing and that now you have something that you recognize if you're a classic player when you come to retail, right? Magmorax. That works.
That's so good. Holy shit. Okay, so yeah, we put Magmorax. I renamed Swamp Ass to Why Does This Exist and put it there because I genuinely that's a rough one. Okay, and then let's move on to the last 2. We put Echo of Neltharion in be previously. I want to explain part of that. So this boss had major design flaws going into PTR before it was live. Actually, almost all of these things got changed after the tier was released on Mythic in the first 2 days of like heroic and normal splits and stuff. There used to be a line of sight mechanic. There was only 3 volcanic hearts, and they had to be line of sighted. Now there are 5, and they are with like a radius around them. That was definitely a better choice. The shield on the last guy, the voices or whatever, those were 1.5 million, and the MC people could hit each other. That was changed, I believe, after we made this ranking. The number was already lower, I think, but the amount of people was still 2, and they could cleave each other. They made it 3. Basically, they made the MC mechanic not up. We thought the MC mechanic would be bad on progression. You couldn't bring certain classes. That ended up being totally not true. Like, how fast it was broken out ended up not really mattering. And this boss is short, but I think this boss is awesome. Like, I think this, again, you're just starting this, right? But this, like, P1 is fucking cool as hell. It's like probably the most reminiscent of like Blackhand P1, right? Like, you can either lust it and beat it easily, or you can do what Echo did, which is like, you're basically, if you watch Echo's kill, they're basically pushing P1 as the fire is crawling into them, and it's like exactly right? And then like that allows them to save lust for a very cool last phase. I know you have not done this on Mythic yet, but you spent a lot of time watching Echo do it, right? At the event. What is your opinion on this fight?
Yeah, I think this is reasonably cool. It does seem like that last phase, like the tension of where to lust is kind of interesting too, because from what I could see, it felt like the last phase was free in the sense of like, you get here with all your players, you kill the boss, reasonably few pulls from that point, but that may have been because of the decision to like have P1 be hard without the lust there, right? And so that's kind of cool. Yeah, I mean, we put this in B tier because we assumed that they weren't going to fix mostly the corruption mechanic being really painful, and to their credit, they made that a lot less bad. They also fixed the line of sight mechanic, which I also wasn't expecting to see not in its previous state. It is the kind of the first relevant private aura mechanic.
Oh
and
yeah,
I don't think
that's a
it
big conversation to be had.
At the private aura
Yep.
thing super well, because you still have like a weak aura that just gives you a list of players and then shows the private aura next to them, right? And
it's a really shitty, they made you use really shitty weak auras, and I know I said they made you use. If you did not use this like list thing that people did, if you guys are unsure, like I'm showing my mouse on it right now, what this is it is literally a raid frame just listed down. So and then with the debuffs for private auras to the right of them, and then you basically chose your position based on where you were in the list. There's no difference between you getting text on your screen and saying go to X marker and reading yourself on a list. One of them is just super convoluted, hard to understand, and whatever. And let's go and say you were even unable to do that. This mechanic would have been a major problem. Major. You would have wiped 3 times as much, and it wouldn't have been to organic difficulty. It would have been having to YOLO these being fucking impossibly hard with the time you had and how big they were. And that would have been like a, them basically, you could say, making a mechanic for weak auras. People complain about that a lot. They would have basically done that here and then not given you the weak aura, and it would have felt fucking terrible. So I think that was like overall. I think rushing darkness was fine, but the private aura volcanic heart I think takes an entire tier grade off of this fight.
Yeah, I agree with that. Again, haven't yet progressed it further myself, but I do think that it looks like a fight I'm going to enjoy. It has a lot of innovative design. It's flavorful. It's 3 phases that are short and sweet and right next to each other, and they have different things going on in them pretty well. I think the way that the walls interact, fundamentally, that's the sort of mechanic that I think would feel really annoying in a lot of places, and I think they've done a good job of like making the wall mechanic matter to the fight and not be super painful. So I don't know. I'm pretty happy giving this thing a high grade. I think.
Oh, me too.
I think maybe giving it like S or A.
Pretty
appropriate.
I would say this boss. I think the private aura weirdness cannot have it be like top tier. Also, like in P2, like the safe spot in P2 is so unbelievably sketchy. Like, it just looks like you're gonna die every time. They could remove like a few yards from this mechanic. It'd be slightly less bullshit, and it would be just better for the game. I'd imagine that's actually probably one of the first things they will do. I think this boss is really good. I think all 3 phases are cool. I think the last phase is really cool. I think P1, for like a second to last boss P1, I think that P1 is like very, very top tier. Like I like it's probably better than like most second to last boss P1s. It's just another fight that are short. If this boss is a 10-minute, 9-minute second to last boss, which is very common, this boss is 150 pulls. You know, like it's just really hard. So they would have to like every phase challenges you mechanically. I'd be down for S and not the top tier. Are you stuck between A and S?
Yeah, so I'm happy with S on this. I think deferring to you on these last two makes a lot more sense, and I do think that the Private Aura thing is probably the biggest knock against this fight.
Oh fuck, I did it on the wrong list. Sorry, chat. All right, here we go. All right, and then the Big Daddy Sarkareth. So I think we should probably tackle this by phase. And I know you've done this in Heroic, and I know you watched a lot of Mythic. And I am going to kind of, I had a ton of fun strategizing this fight. I felt very involved the whole time. It was a fucking amazing raid leader fight. Like, it was so fun. But that is something that is not really the case for a lot of other guilds. Because raid leading, for a lot of people that don't know, raid leading, like calling things is like kind of irrelevant. In a lot of cases, isn't even doing anything. It's like all you're doing is constantly solving problems. This was just a problem-solving masterpiece from start to finish, and now that that's been solved, you kind of just follow the strat. You still make changes. People innovate and farm all the time, but like, a lot of that has been done already. This was like so fucking fun to do that, but that's something that isn't going to apply to everyone. So let's kind of start with this. I think this is the best P1 of an end boss they have made in a very long time. I think P1 of this fight is fucking unbelievable. It's like Sire Denathrius, but without a ton of AoEing ads and like lagging the fuck out of your raid. Like you still have the raid damage, you still separate people where you need to, but it's constant moving, it's crazy healing. I think at the end of this phase, your healers are doing 1 million HPS between the 4 of them. Like you're never topped. It's not always the same. Sometimes you improvise and go a little bit differently. Depending on your healer comp, you actually soak things at different times. So like the creativity you can have in this phase is like fucking awesome. What is your opinion from having watched this?
Yeah, so like I assume you're talking about like Mistweaver Revival giving you an extra way to handle it, right? And like, I think that's cool. Yeah, I think that the P1 tightness of the phase is very high, right? Like people are going to die to a mistake they make. They're going to need to use almost all of their defensive resources to live through it. I will say one thing that I think is kind of interesting about this fight, and I'm not sure I like, is that for an end boss, you can progress between the phases and like see the later phases without having done the last phase very well. That's something that's not normally true, right?
The previous phase, you mean?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
normally, in order to see P2 and start making any kind of substantial progression in it, you need to have done P1 pretty close to perfectly, right? And like, of course, you get better over the fight. But Sire Denathrius, right? You didn't start seeing P2 right away. Whereas this fight, you did basically start seeing P2 right away.
Oh, literally, the one
P3.
pull we did off stream after killing Echo of Neltharion that one night was we just did P1 and we never got hit by any Searing Breaths or Disintegrates. And we kept like 2 people alive going into P2, and we saw like a ton of timers for us to optimize as we went to bed, right? Like you could just kind of get through like that, where you could never do that with Denathrius.
Yeah, and I think that's a bad thing, but I'm not super confident in that. But I feel like for end bosses, like one thing that leads to this one having a small pull count and leads to it feeling maybe a little bit easier is that you don't really have this sort of feeling of like, oh, we're in P1 prog, and now we're in P2 prog, now we're in P3 prog, right? Like you kind of have this sort of more amorphous kind of blob of prog that you're doing.
I think so. I think one thing I would push back on that is I would actually mention Fallen Avatar. I remember one thing that people thought was really good about Fallen Avatar was that P1 of that boss was incredibly hard, but then P2 was just totally different. But once you got to P2, you could kind of just pull the boss, give him 100 energy, and just see downstairs. And like that was something that a lot of people actually fondly remembered from that fight. And that's kind of like the opposite opinion of what you just said, right?
Yeah, so maybe again, like I'm not super confident one way or the other. Maybe this is just a better way for fights to work, but it is an interesting thing about Sarkareth is that you don't need to, like, there's no check to get out of P1 or P2. You just have to survive.
I think they also made really, really wise decisions about understanding how classes in this game do damage. They basically did not make this a percentage-based push. Once people start getting crazy gear, like 10 eye levels higher than what we killed it, which I think is possible this patch, where like later in the patch you will just do crazy damage, it's possible you hit the health thresholds that you can't really get to now. But like I do think P1 does auto phase at 60%, but it's like a 145 phase basically. So they went for like jailer kind of health percentage based pushes, but Castle Nathria health thresholds kinda. So that was like kind of interesting where like it wasn't really, so there's no like holding damage. And then when you go down, it's like the fight it is not an accident, I think, where you go down on Sarkareth at the beginning of P2 and you have all your 2 minutes up, right? Like that seems clearly by design. Like the phase ends at 145, everyone goes downstairs, the fight does that, you come back upstairs, like all your cooldowns. And then the same thing kind of in the last phase. The fight, I think, is trying to, I still haven't figured this out. I don't know if they expected us to clear in the last phase in groups, or if they thought we were going to do the everyone goes down at once except for one person thing. I'm kind of leaning towards the second one because they literally teach you to do that earlier, but it does seem kind of counterintuitive. We can kind of move off of P1. I really feel like P1 is just... once everyone does this, I guarantee you, regardless of your gear, you will feel the same. That phase is fucking sweet. It is good. P2 is where I feel like this boss loses points. P2 is probably the main reason this boss is short. P2s are actually commonly what makes end bosses, if they're ever not awesome. It's usually because the P2 really doesn't make a lot of sense and is kind of not very thought out. This P2 is weird. It's like the only thing that's different is like you have like a big ad that you have to kill, and then you have like, which is fine. There's some like ad killing element on this fight, which ended up mattering. There's like Desolate Blossom, which is like this extremely unique mechanic that only exists once, and you just kind of stack it up and you go in together. I don't know. P2 just seems like that is what took 2 minutes off this fight, because like the last phase is very hard, very good, and it lasts a long time, right? P2 is the one where it's like just as short as P1, but it doesn't seem like it accomplishes what P1 accomplished. I would have liked to have seen a different P2. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, the P2, it's an interesting one. Again, I haven't yet fought it, but I think that from watching it, I would agree that P3 looks phenomenal. The kind of general design of this fight as well seems really cool. I will say I was a little disappointed by how the tank mechanic ended up working out as well, because it promises you this thing in the dungeon journal where it's like, oh, you know, you're trying to mitigate this and like have the damage that you take, how much damage you reduce from it like matters, but it turns out you just like can't hit, you can never hit people with it in P2 or P3 or they're gonna die, right?
Yeah.
So that part I feel like is a little bit
yeah, actually, I want to give them some context on that. So this, for a lot of people who do not follow this extremely closely, you'll probably want to know this. So going into the raid, tank compositions were super specific this raid, because the last boss had this mechanic where it's like, oh my god, in the last phase, so much of your raid damage is going to come from your tanks. And when you looked at the numbers, it was livable. Like, you were like, this is feasible that you could hit the raid with this and actually deal with it. I think after you did it, you were like, okay, there's absolutely no fucking way that you would want to get hit by these, because you can take them downstairs. But it was not super clear in the journal how you would deal with that. So I think it was kind of, people were like theorizing like, oh, what tank can you play to specifically reduce the thing of this? And maybe it could have been a dead giveaway. None of us really thought this, but like the difference in tank balance on this fight would have been bordering unkillable if you played the wrong one, kind of thing. And that is maybe should have let us see that. But I do think it does take some points off that the tank mechanic is supposed to fucking own you, but it just ended up being, it doesn't really matter, because you just go downstairs, you take 99% reduced damage from it, and then it just doesn't hit the raid, right?
Yeah, exactly. Which, I mean, again, to be fair, it's nice that you can play a Guardian Druid on this fight in theory, I guess. That's good.
Yeah.
But it is like, I guess it's more just like as a tank. I guess we had an exciting mechanic on Echo of Neltharion that's kind of cool, but...
oh, we forgot to mention
Rashok
that. That is like an
yeah.
all-time tank mechanic.
Yeah, the P2 one is pretty special, so...
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, again, like I agree. It's probably for the best that you can go down or like range it in P2 or whatever. Like that is almost certainly for the best. But still, it is a case of like, oh, this is actually not like an interesting tank mechanic actually.
And then before we really get into the last phase, I do think I have one general criticism, which is the holes in the ground in this fight. If you guys are watching the fight, like any of these blue holes, if you walk into them, you're just gonna get ported under the platform and die. They go away after 3 minutes, which means the ones from P1 like insanely don't matter. And I feel like there could have been a very killable version of this fight that has those never go away. I feel like half of the room being open here, like that mechanic is something you never think about, and it's like kind of the main mythic edition. So not a huge deal, and it's possible I'm wrong, and like if that's the fight, it's like super annoying. But I feel like they could have gotten away with making it, because I think like I think this fight is awesome. I think it has low pull counts mainly because it's just literally half as long as a normal end boss is, but it's still mechanically very challenging. But I think I would have liked this boss to be like 1 minute longer, and I think that could have come from a better P2, or even just a 1 minute longer P1 would have been fine. And then just a little bit more difficulty, and it would be from that specific mythic mechanic. Especially, and another thing too, I guess now that we're getting into P3, is like if you guys notice how we deal with being safe on this fight, these Scouring Eternities all come from one direction. They come from exactly where the boss spawns on the pole. One place, so you can put an Astral Formation there and never think about it, right? And then you can just get rid of the other ones with black holes at any other point. I think that was kind of weird. You could have made the Scouring Eternity come from any direction in the room, and you had to have an Astral Formation in a good spot to deal with all of them. That's certainly a change they could have made that I think would have been a better boss. I love the like going downstairs mechanic though. I don't know if that's true of like most classes, but like I feel like the whole going downstairs, getting haste, and coming up thing is just like a really, really good mechanic. What did you think from watching this fight?
Yeah, so the way that it's kind of done as well at the start of P3, I feel like is really cool too. The feeling of like coming back up and blasting and like starting off P3 with a huge damage burst. I think that's neat. The haste, I mean, haste is a pretty good stat for almost everybody as well. I happen to be playing Brewmaster this tier, so I will get to be the person that
that doesn't
really
get that.
care, but yeah, that's fine. That's not a big deal.
But at the same time, I've done that before as like a tank job. When you're the like one person staying up and doing that, that's cool too, because you're like doing your own thing, you know?
Yeah, the start of P3 tank job as well, where you're like manipulating the entire boss by yourself. Like I feel like that's pretty high tank fantasy or whatever, of being like, you know, one person against the boss. So I don't know. I think that's cool. I agree with you, I guess, about the one asteroid against the edge of the room, trivializing that mechanic being a weird thing. I don't know what the right answer for it is, but I think that I think yeah, like you said, just random directions would be one way to fix that. Then you'd probably have to put like a couple near some edges or near the center. Like halfway between the center and an edge or something. I don't know.
Another thing they did on this boss too is I think going into it, no one knew exactly how much movement was going to be in this fight, because we saw the like the remnant of Ner'zhul knockback mechanic, and you're like, okay, how often is that going to go out? And I remember it used to be a 30-second debuff, so you're like, okay, are you going to get these every 30 seconds? And it ended up being like way longer than that. It's like a minute and 20 or something in between knockbacks. So it ended up being about the right time for that. I will say about this boss's length, so they took a big swing here. Blizzard was basically saying we should try a shorter end boss, and they went like real short. It was not, they did not go halfway. They did like the shortest end boss ever. I would like to say that I like the direction. I think they probably swung a little too far in this direction, but this boss is not something that you're going to kill and be like, oh, I just killed like a really easy end boss. Like you will feel good when you kill this fight. This fight's very hard in the last phase. I loved the Oblivion mechanic and how you dealt with it. It gives you multiple ways to problem solve it. You guys saw a world first and second kill using very, very different strategies in the last phase. There's much more potential strategies you could do as well. I think this will be a boss that people will fondly remember doing even deep into farm, even with a lot of gear, because this is not a fight where you're going to like the amount of gear you're going to have to like not actually do the going downstairs and resetting thing is like super fucking high, right? Like you're going to have to learn how to do that. That's challenging, that's rewarding to do. I think it's awesome, and I hope they continue doing sub 10 minute end bosses. I very strongly think that a really challenging sub 10 minute end boss is just objectively better than a boss that's just as challenging and 14 minutes long, because I think too much of the difficulty just becomes that it's long and not that it's like organically difficult. So I definitely want them to keep going in that direction. Also, one more thing that's different about this tier, and this was super like a big fucking deal coming into this patch, was there was virtually 0 bugs. I think maybe in total like 8 things got changed, and it was really small stuff, and there was no overtuning whatsoever. You know, I think most people would say that like having like a little bit higher tuning would have been fine, but I think a lot of that was just due to the upgrade system. We were just so much more geared than normal, and they said they're bringing the upgrade system into the next patch. I think this is not like a word on the street thing. I think they're going to reduce the amount of crests you get every week, and I think people might get a little upset about that initially because some people like getting all this gear at once, but I think it is a little too extreme, right? Like it's a lot.
Yeah, the feeling of like it is 8 days into the patch or something, I don't have anything to do on my main character is weird. I think it is weird in the kind of like, okay, it probably shouldn't be this way sort of sense, but I mean, I think it is really good what the upgrade system is doing for not just for alts, but also for main characters, right? And the tier acquisition being so free as well is I think really, really good too. I think another thing they could potentially nerf about it that would maybe make sense is like, I'm not sure normal needs to go all the way up to 437 and heroic needs to go all the way up to 441.
Yeah.
I feel like the fact that a heroic Kazzara drop gets upgraded to the same eye level that a mythic Kazzara drop just drops at unupgradable, I feel like that's probably bad. Like I think killing mythic Rashok, giving you gear that is 3 item levels better than upgrading heroic Rashok gear and 6 item levels better than upgrading normal Rashok gear, I think that's probably a little bit too not enough of a difference, but
yeah,
not by much, right? Like I think maybe their initial swing here was a little bit too much of a loot pinata type thing, but it's definitely better that they started in this direction and are adjusting a little bit maybe in the other direction rather than
we'll talk about this in a
starting
second.
too low.
I think we could actually just talk about the gear upgrade system in general as a standalone thing at some point, but we can even touch on it after this. I want to say it's going to be hard to tell about the exact tuning of this raid and whether it's good for the game or bad for the game, because it's obviously very like polarizing. Like right now it's hard because like after any race world first, a lot of people's opinions are heavily moved by whether their favorite guild won or lost. So that's certainly part of it. But what I want to see is like in 2 to 3 months, what does the tuning of this raid and the gear system interact with most people who are clearing Mythic? If you normally take all patch to clear Cutting Edge, but let's say you clear it in like 3 months now or like a month earlier, are people generally happier with the game being able to like feel like they were still getting a quality good raid, but it's like just less total time, so they're able to like play other games or do other things or do more Mythic Plus or not have raid times be strict for 6 months? Another thing they're going to be able to do is like I think they're going to have to nerf this raid a lot less than they've nerfed previous raids, mainly because of the gearing system and the tuning. Whether that's a thing that's better for the game is something that to me, just top of my head, sounds like it's better for the game, but I think all of us should just give it a good like 2 months, something like that, and see how people who usually get Cutting Edge actually interacted with this, because I think you'll see a lot of everything. It's just whether you're going to see more of, you know what, this raid was fucking awesome. I love doing this raid. We got done a little bit earlier. I was able to spend some time doing other things. And then some people will probably feel like, you know what, I usually look for like a huge challenge in these raids, and I don't feel like I got that. And, you know, I wish it was like, I wish we had like a little bit more content every patch like we used to, which is like content is like the time you spend doing these things. I can tell you from our experience, this raid took less pulls and these bosses were shorter. We did not kill any of these last 3 bosses, and we felt like we killed a boss that was not supposed to be where it was in the raid. They have short pulls, but they're mechanically very difficult, and I don't think the gear is going to change the kill amounts by that much going forward. Like, you already see people 4 or 5 eye levels higher than we were on our killing it this week with similar pull counts. A lot of the other previous bosses. So I think it's going to maintain its difficulty, but we will have to take time to see where that lands.
Yeah, again, like I suspect the right answer here is, you know, having a couple more weeks where you're like gearing up, and that's more of a thing. But I do agree that it's much better to land on this side than it is to land on the way too hard thing, and it's way better than like landing on the way too hard thing and then not nerfing it when you should. Like Sepulcher, I mean Sepulcher Race to World First was one thing, but Sepulcher 2 months after Race to World First with those bosses being unnerfed was wild as well. A lot of those bosses did not get changed anywhere near as timely as they needed to.
Mm-hmm.
So if they're not willing to do timely changes, then doing a raid like this is the best option for sure.
Okay, so now that we have gone through all of this, I think Sarkareth is not a DDDD. That would be my take, and the reason why is I think the short fight time is fine. I think 7.5 minutes could be fine. I think P2 could have been better. I think P1 and P3 are actually all-time phases. If you look at the best bosses of all time, the P3 of Sarkareth and P1 of Sarkareth hold up to every single one of them. And I don't even think P2 was awful. I just don't think it was perfect. I would not compare this boss to Blackhand. I would put Blackhand in this line. I would put Denathrius and Lei Shen in this line. I don't think Sarkareth is on a top 5 end boss of all time tier, but I think it's pretty close. So I would put it in S. What are your thoughts?
I like S as well. Yeah, if in a couple weeks, once I've pulled this thing, I have some fatal flaw that I find with it, I'm gonna DM you. But otherwise, I'm
all right. Yeah,
I'm
and we can alter that for sure. Yeah. Okay, so let's see how many we got right. I think we got Kazzara right. We got, oh, whoa, never mind. We got Kazzara and Zaqali Assault right. We
were doing so well.
We were doing so well. We were pretty close on Amalgamation Chamber. We were very wrong on Magmorax, like historically wrong. Zskarn, we were 4 things off. But I think the pre-raid Zskarn ranking made sense, though, because it had all the tools to be there. You know, it just kind of didn't hit it. I'm just trying to see, like, I wonder where we made an egregious... I mean, Magmorax was probably an egregious mistake. But, like, I wonder where the rest of them are. And it looks fine.
Yeah, Magmorax and Zskarn were the two most changed from PTR to live as well, so it makes sense that those are ones we missed the most on.
And then comparing this to previous raids, we'll have our new updated one on the right. We also did this in Vault, and we ranked the Vault fights. Me and you did. I think, let me see if I can find that. Vault, I imagine it's still there. If not, I can pull up the YouTube video. So here we go. So our Vault of the Incarnates raid bosses on Mythic were, none of them were in DDDD. Taros was an S. Broodkeeper and Aranog were in A. Kurog and Primal Council were in B. Senarth was in C. Mythic Razageth and Dathia were in Swamp Ass. So I think overall, it just the raid just trends a little higher, right, than Vault did.
Yeah, I mean, Vault had nothing really good in terms of fights, from as far as I'm concerned, right? Like, there aren't any fights that I'm going to miss out of Vault of the Incarnates not doing every week. Aranog is actually maybe I guess Aranog and maybe Taros, but Vault had this super weird loot stuff, and I think one thing that Aberrus has going for it is that there isn't that weird Vault pollution stuff. There aren't those, like, the very rare items from the early bosses aren't super broken like Icon and Aranog Ring were. You know, the scale off of Kazzara is like a good trinket, but it's not Turbo Bis.
Dude, there's so many good conversations to have with, like, a round table of people. Like, very rare loot, upgrade system, how Mythic Plus feels now with less dog shit affixes and, like, a pretty good dungeon set. There's, like, a bunch of good ones of like very different things this patch compared to the past.
Yeah, the content farm is it's got some good seeds planted for the next few months.
Yeah. Okay. Hell yeah. All right, dude. It was great talking to you. We will make sure to do all of those things soon. And welcome back from your how long was the flight from Sweden?
It's like 11 hours.
Whoo! All right.
Yeah.
So you're probably... Have you had your great slumber yet?
Yeah, I slumbered on the plane as well, but I also I've slumbered a lot over the past few days, so I'm good.
Okay. All right. It was nice talking to you, man.
All right, thank you.
All right, see you, bud.
Then.
Yep. Oh, I should have hit him with the love you and then hung up. You're right. Fuck me.